Hello, and welcome to the Sailing and Cruising the East Coast of the United States podcast. I'm Bela Musits.
And I'm Mike Wasserman.
Hey, Mike, today's guest on the podcast is Rob Sweet. He's been on the show several times before. He's an interesting person in that he lives in Pittsburgh, but keeps his boat in Florida. So that's probably about a 3-hour plane ride. So that's sort of interesting, the dynamics of that. And him and his wife spent several months in the Bahamas earlier this year. And Rob is also a physician. And so in this episode, we sort of talk about medical emergencies at sea. And we also talk about a first aid course that he took. Even though he's a physician, they don't teach physicians a lot of first aid. So he wanted to sort of know certain things to do. So we talked about the first aid course he took and his experience as a physician and and he had a nice long list of tips and things to think about if you're on the boat and how to be prepared if something happens, someone gets injured. So I thought that was pretty good. It was a pretty good episode from that perspective.
Yeah, Bela, and a lot of our conversations are super interesting and super fun. We've had some very funny, humorous guests on, but today's topic is just a bit more important than some of our typical ones, I think. So this is one where, at least I'm going to strongly encourage our listeners to pay pretty close attention, maybe more than normal, and actually take some action after this episode is done. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's a good thought, Mike. So let's jump right into my discussion with Rob Sweet. Hello, Rob. Nice to see you again.
Yeah, great to be back, Bela.
Yeah, this is wonderful. I love having repeat guests. Now, one of the things you and I have talked about in the past is, both of us are sort of at the older end of the spectrum, and we're not as limber and docile as maybe we used to be.
Well,
and losing and I certainly know my sense of balance is not as good. So one of the things you worry about is getting hurt. And it's one thing to get hurt when I'm bopping around in Narragansett Bay, 10 minutes from shore. It's another thing to get hurt when you're on a longer trip. So recently you took a kind of first aid course intended for sailors and mariners. So can you describe sort of what your motivation for that was, maybe a little bit about your background and how that fits in? And then maybe we can talk a little bit about the course and sort of what you learned and what your thoughts are.
Sure. So I'll give you my background first, because that fits into how I came to this idea. So I'm a physician, but my clinical specialty was geriatric psychiatry. So not well versed in the kinds of things that emergency room doctors have to take care of. But since I focus on geriatrics, I'm actually pretty knowledgeable about the many things that can go wrong for older people in life and in medical care. So I brought that perspective in. I was out hiking with a friend of mine who was also a physician, and told me about how when he was getting busy hiking, he decided to take a wilderness medicine course. And I thought, when I was younger and I did a lot of hiking, I had thought about doing that, never had. And I thought, it would be great if there's something like that for sailing, because the ocean is a large wilderness.
Yes.
And so I looked around a little bit, searched some online stuff, and found this particular company, Wilderness Medical Associates, that teach wilderness medicine, but they have an offshore medicine course. They're sailors as well, and it's this course is designed for people on boats, sailing or otherwise. And looked, and was convenient to sign up for it. I live in Pittsburgh. It was being offered in Annapolis, which is about a 4-hour drive from me, as part of the Annapolis boat show, the fall boat show. So that was like double fun. And when you signed up for the course, you got free entry to the boat show every day as well. I want to give a shout out. It was a really nice organization that had the course list together. It's called Cruisers University, that they run those through the boat show. They have lots of different courses. There was all sorts of interesting content besides this medicine course. diesel engine repair, boat electronics, navigation, any number of things. Really, the whole thing was a lot of fun. But the medicine course was the one I took.
Yes.
And the people who ran it were great. The founder was not able to make it because he himself was having recovering from a medical procedure, but his brother, who's a longtime fire chief and EMT, took over, and the two other people who were giving talks, really capable practitioners. I believe they were both nurse practitioners. It's possible one was just a nurse, but I think both were nurse practitioners or PAs. I don't recall now, but both had tons of wilderness experience. One worked variably in sort of a wilderness emergency room setting in Alaska, or on these Alaskan high latitude big ships as the medical officer. The other had worked as the medical officer stranded in like Antarctica for 7 months as the medical officer for all those people, had been to Haiti and dealt with after the disasters there and helped with the tropical diseases. So they really knew their stuff. I was very pleased with that. And they had the curriculum was great. So my motivation was to be able to handle at least common stuff. Like right now, we sailing between Florida and the Bahamas. And so you're never that far out of reach of some kind of possible rescue, but that doesn't mean it isn't hours away. And in the Bahamas, even when you're near shore, you may not be very near to adequate medical care. And again, you can be a few islands away, could be on a sailboat, it's slow, right? It could be 5 hours, 8 hours, 12 hours. So you need to be able to handle some basic medical emergencies well. So that was my take. The people who joined were mostly a lot of cruising couples, some younger, most probably in 50s or 60s. In many cases, it was one member of a couple, and the other member had previously taken the course, or vice versa, but they were trading. And that was one good thing I learned. So I'm going to sign my wife up for this next year, since it's often just the two of us on the boat.
Right.
Not good if I'm the one who goes down. She knows, needs to know how to do something. So they focus on many of the common things that you could experience. So anyone who's been on a boat knows probably one of the most likely sources of injury is just falling into something, right? Falling against something in front. You can break a rib, you can break a wrist, a finger, you can dislocate a shoulder. It wouldn't be that hard to do on a boat when you're all that rocking motion. Obviously, dehydration is another very common possible outcome, especially if people are seasick for days. Heat or cold exposure would be another, depending on where you sail. So heat stroke or hypothermia. Those are going to be like the common things. And then, just easy to get a gash someplace, right? To open some kind of wound, most likely not a life-threatening one, but still something that has to stay clean, and you don't want to get infected in any kind of dangerous way, right? Because they very well could be a dirty wound, right? You get caught on something that's not clean. So they covered those, as well as some other things, anaphylaxis from whatever you might bee stings or some sort of fish sting, right? And they covered some more severe things. They required everyone ahead of time to be CPR certified. So they wanted people to know that, though the idea of helping someone recover using CPR on a boat is not too likely, right? That the chances of right now, when people recover, it's usually when there's rapid application of a defibrillator followed by immediate transport to a cardiac intensive, emergency room, right? Or program. Right. And so even if you carry an AED on your boat, the likelihood that you could then sustain someone till they could get someplace. And rescues at sea are not so straightforward. That was another nice thing they did. They did a lot thinking about whether what was higher risk, trying to treat or stabilize a condition or trying to get someone taken off the boat or out of the, out. Having a helicopter drop down a lift, like this is a dangerous procedure for everyone.
That's right. That's right.
Plus, if there's only two of you on the boat and one of you has exited that way, is the other one prepared to get the boat to say, I mean, there's lots of complications. So thinking about how to balance those risks was important. As a physician, I of course have a unique perspective. So even though my practice hasn't involved these kinds of critical situations for years, I had exposure to them in medical school and early in my training. And so as a physician, there's a good chance that, you participated in cardiac arrest and CPR and watched someone die. There's a reasonable chance that you, as a practicing physician, through something you did or failed to do, directly or indirectly, had someone die as a consequence, right? And it doesn't have to be anything egregious. It can be you did the right thing, you give them the right pill, but they fell down, broke their hip, and then passed away, right? And couldn't have been anticipated. So I know what it's like to live with those decisions and how to be with them. But for the people in the room who haven't had that experience, that's a tough. They talked about it, but I was sitting there wondering, how well people were going to be prepared for those kinds of choices, especially if you go far offshore, right? You're going across the Atlantic, across the Pacific. You really are going to be on your own for a very long time.
That's right. That's right. And you can get appendicitis.
Yes. So as a matter of fact, they spent some time trying to, talk about how to assess whether or not abdominal pain, different conditions. So they spend a lot.
Yes.
For me, all the physiology and stuff was reviewed, but for all these people, it's very new, right? Now, that was another good example of where I, as a physician who went through training on how to say assess if someone having appendicitis versus some other benign abdominal condition or something else going on, that knowing even the very good people, very best people are not so good at doing those things. They're mysterious.
That's right. That's right.
And so I feel like for that kind of thing where you're really going to be out at sea and you don't have prior experience, or even if it was me with experience, I would want to get someone who has much more day-to-day experience, an emergency room physician who's available to me on the phone, who I could get help with in deciding how dangerous is this. And I don't need to go into all the like there are a lot of different medical conditions that could be in this tricky space, right? But and of course they did a nice job training people to try and assess this, but so we had there was a section they did on respiratory problems, breathing problems, right? And they taught you to kind of differentiate the different types, an upper airway obstruction, a lower airway problem, et cetera. And then they would do role play. So they'd send half the class out and give them instructions about what symptoms they were going to demonstrate. And then half of the class would have to go out to diagnose them. And, they'd spend a lot of time on anaphylaxis and difficulty breathing due to a sudden allergic reaction. So that was in everyone's mind. And so everyone went out, and I'm walking out there, and I see one of my classmates, and she's interviewing this person who's standing with his hands around his throat in what is the universal sign of choking, right? Yes. And she's trying to ask him questions because she's got anaphylaxis in her, like, are you allergic to bees? Have you, Right. And he's in the meantime starting to slowly die. I walked up and saw this, so I just said, he's choking, ran around, gave a fake Heimlich, and he popped out a fake obstruction, right? Yeah. And it just speaks to that a rookie hasn't had the experience of trying to assess people's medical stuff a lot, and sometimes your patients are sometimes it's bad acting, right? They don't know how to do the symptoms sometimes, but also your patients in real life don't always present symptoms like it comes out of a textbook. So I think like having a big part of the learning was like, here are some resources you can reach out to. Here's what you should have on your boat. Here's where you can get it. Here's some medical resources you can reach out to, have landline connections with people, right? Satellite phones, whatever, to have backup.
Yes. Yes.
They did some, they did some fun stuff, training on packing wounds or irrigating wounds. They gave some people a chance to try and learn stitch things up. That was another thing I learned, that I haven't done any stitching since I was in medical school. I would not want to try and refresh my skills on a boat that's rocking through a seaway, right? That's a good time to put a pressure bandage on, stop the bleeding, keep it together, and wait till you get someone who knows what they're doing to sew it back, right? So, but the training was good. I mean, all these were discussions, so they weren't blindly telling people like this, like you're going to be okay to do this. There were a lot of discussions with a lot of good content, and opportunities to at least get people thinking really detailed about also what to do, what you need to know about your passengers, your crew, when they come on board. Now here's where we get to the geriatrics, right? So most people our age are taking anywhere from 2 to 5 or 7 medicines.
Yes.
It would be wise, before having them on your boat for an extended visit, for someone to have a record of all of what they take and any allergies they have and any medical allergies. Like, it would be good, whether that's the captain or there's a designated medical officer, right? That whoever's running the boat, it would make sense for people to know that.
Right. It's just like when you send your kids to camp.
Correct.
You gotta disclose all that stuff.
Right. And before you take someone off into the wilderness on your boat, see, it's a little different. I don't know if all of you go off on a hiking party and no one's paying for the, well, you're all in it together. But on the boat, the captain is actually responsible for the safety and well-being. And so asking this stuff as part of a safety briefing, talking about, we need to know, and they really emphasize talking to your guests or crew, whichever it may be, about, if you aren't feeling poorly in any way, like you need to take a Tylenol because you're not feeling right, or just a little, whatever it is, I want to hear about it. Because in case it's the first sign of something worse, I just need to be aware of it, right? Yeah. Have a bad headache, that's fine. Go take your Tylenol. But like, if you're 65 or 70 and you had bumped your head when you were walking someplace, you got a bad headache, maybe I want to think about whether you are starting to bleed into your brain, and I should know you have a headache, right? So that was nice, kind of like stuff I would not have thought about in terms of preparing for being offshore. One thing I thought about as a geriatrician, that everyone wants to take seasickness medicines, right? So I came to this, so they had a demonstration. They gave it like things you could carry on the boat, included something called a Foley catheter. That's a urinary catheter for helping drain the bladder. Now, if you've never tried to put a Foley catheter into an older man, you have no idea how complicated that is. And will you have to ever do that? You for sure will if your older male friend who comes on the boat decides to take his scopolamine patch, which can cause urinary retention, and he has a large prostate, and you will have problems. So, and old people get confused when they take seasickness medicine sometimes. And so one of the thoughts I had is, I'm going to tell everyone I know over a certain age that before you come on the boat, if you think you're going to need to take seasickness medicine, take it at home. Take it at home at least, for a couple of days, and make sure you're okay.
Yes. Yes. It is amazing how I've had people on the boat, and I use a patch all the time, but I've used a patch for many years, and I know I don't have any bad side effects. I don't actually know if I get seasick or not, because I've never not gone on a long passage without the patch. Maybe that's an experiment someday I'll do. But it is amazing how people will go on vacation, or they'll get on an airplane, or they'll get on a boat, and they'll take some medicine for the very first time.
Right.
And so this notion of trying it out in advance to make sure you don't have some unusual reaction or response to it, I think is really good advice.
Yeah, especially before you come on my boat.
Yes.
Right. Before it's my problem. Let's know.
That's right.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. They did a little piece on how do you move someone if they get injured up on the deck and you need to get them down to the boat, how to move people safely in a boat. Did a bunch of stuff that I found very useful on how to splint fractures, how to think about relocating dislocated joints, things of that sort, where it could be done and might be critical to save someone's limb function.
Yeah.
And because even if you're stuck 6 hours away from an ER, like that might be too long for that.
Yes, it can be way too long. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, how long was this course, Rob?
So this was an intensive course. It was three days, 8 to 5 every day.
Oh,
And
wow.
they sent us a book to read through ahead of time, which for me as a physician was mostly review, because I've known all this stuff before. I've studied it extensively, but for other people would have included a lot of learning about basics of anatomy and physiology. And there was a pre-test to get you up to speed. And then I think I said the CPR requirement ahead of time.
Yes. Yes. Interesting. And did they talk about when do you call for help? What's the trigger point for saying, okay,
Sure.
I need to make that radio call and get some assistance?
Sure. They went through a lot on almost all the different kinds of emergencies about assessing, is it serious? Right? That's the first thing. And then is it urgent or an emergency where they have to be moved, and where you have to then assess the risk of rescue versus the risk of continuing on. And so for almost every topic area, they would quiz afterwards. Okay, is this serious? Yes or no? And then if the answer is yes, is it urgent or an emergency? But your options, right, can really vary. So, I guess your boat, your VHF radio on your boat has that little button you can hit that.
Yes.
If there's someone within distance of your broadcast, right? When we were sailing back from the Bahamas, somewhere in the middle of the Gulf Stream, when we could see there were no boats anywhere in sight or on our AIS, my wife got on the radio to do a radio check. For people who know what that is, it's a way of seeing, can other people hear you? And there was no one answering back. There was no one there that could hear us from there. So you can't always push that button or call for help and have someone who hears it. If you're out within the coastal U.S. and the Bahamas, if the weather's fine, the Coast Guard could get you, right? As long as the weather's fine, that it's not a dangerous situation for them to send, but it may not still be fast. It can still take a couple hours for a helicopter to go 100 miles offshore, several hours.
And to your previous point, assuming you can get a hold of them.
If you can get hold of them. And of course, if you're in the middle of the ocean, the only possible help you would get is if there is a large ship of some kind near enough by to divert to get to you, and they have a medical officer, a medical, medically trained officer on board. But even then, trying to envision how you would get off your little sailboat up onto a cargo ship or a cruise ship, like what that procedure would look like and the danger involved in that.
Right.
That strikes me as maybe more terrifying than getting lifted out by the Coast Guard in a basket or sling.
Right. Yeah. I mean, if you have a fractured lower leg or a fractured arm, how do you get from the boat up, climb up the side of the ship?
Yeah. It's very, very problematic.
Yeah. Interesting. So my last question, has this changed, taking this course, how have you changed what medical supplies you have on the boat?
Sure. So I'm in the process of changing them. So they both in the course and then subsequently wandering through the boat show, identified some resources. So I'm going to have a lot more things on the ship for first aid and better organized. I identified this one kit that's available online, which I like. It's called the Modulator. It's one kit, but it's a bunch of it's all soft little bags, and they're marked like eyes, burns, wounds. Like, so someone could just go see it, grab a bag. But I'm going to have a lot more stuff for irrigating and pressure dressing wounds, because to me, that's the thing to do. It's just you need to and have a tourniquet on so you can stop the bleeding of a wound, get it clean, antibiotics to keep people from getting super infected, just long enough to get them help. That'll be things. I'm going to carry epinephrine on the boat, EpiPens, and probably epinephrine as well, and as well as some follow-up drugs, antihistamines and steroids, in case someone has some kind of crazy reaction to a fish sting or something of the sort. I think those are going to be the biggies of my supplies. At some point, if I was doing a longer voyage, at some point I might consider whether I would carry IV hydration. What's really nice is they have now these IV systems. You don't have to know how to put a needle into a vein.
Yeah.
Right. They're just a little 2-pronged thing you put just under the skin. And so they're subcutaneous rehydration kits.
Huh.
And so easy for anyone to do, as easy as someone given an insulin injection or could rehydrate someone, because that can get very dangerous with people being seasick and in the heat. So that one I'll think about. I'm not sure, but the others for sure. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I put on my purchase list. Oh, and then the medical bag comes with some nice customized, like formable splints for splinting a fracture. You can easily imagine someone fracturing a wrist, right? Like just falling against something. Especially again in our age range, osteoporotic person. And so that's going to be what I'll have. And then I'm going to figure out who I'm going to engage as sort of my onshore medical backup, who'll be available to me. I have some friends in the business. I want to have a service that's got 24/7 availability and video assessments and so forth.
And I think there are such services, right, that you can contract with.
Yes, 100%. It's just too easy when we were out this, trip, it was just too easy for something to happen. We'd be walking on the boat, what's the rule? One hand for you, one for the boat. Right. So you got one on the boat, but it turns out the boat, you can pivot around that sometimes and swing into something.
I have going down the companionway.
Yep. Everyone probably has done that, going up or down it. It's easy to think you're bracing inside the salon and then have some sudden shift of the boat. And now, are you going to fly into the table and crack a rib? So, so it's just too easy to get. So I want to have stuff for these kinds of common injuries.
Yeah. Do you have Starlink on your boat?
I do.
Yeah. So that gives you at least communication almost anywhere that you're at.
Pretty consistently. And one of the advantages of the power upgrade we're putting onto the boat this fall will be that we can run the Starlink without having to worry about tapping out the batteries. We'll have we'll have constant communication if we need it.
Yeah. Very good. Very good. So, Rob, is there anything that I haven't asked you about that you want to share with our listeners before we wrap this up?
Oh, I think it was. I guess it's sort of implicit. I think it's a great idea, despite some of my concerns about whether people can be fully prepared for these things, to go through this course, become more knowledgeable, have the ability to train. If you're the captain, you're responsible for the safety and well-being of your passenger and crew. And I just think that it's occurred to me that this has just got to be part of the safety process and safety briefing. I walk people through, and I discuss the dangers of getting on and off the boat, one of the most dangerous moments, right? That rookies encounter. I show them where the fire extinguishers are, right? Show them where the life vests are and the life raft. Talk about what to do if someone falls in the water as a man overboard. I do all that stuff, and I think medical briefing is going to be part of it as well now. I think that's a great way of thinking about it.
Yeah. This has been a great episode because this is something we don't talk about, we don't think about a lot. But when it happens, you know, it's you need to act sometimes,
right?
And how you act or how you react can make a huge difference in what the outcome is. So very good, excellent. Thank you so much for being on the podcast again, Rob. It was a great episode.
Pleasure. I'll look forward to hearing more podcasts in the future.
Yeah, well, thanks.
All right.
Take care, Bob. Yep.
Bye.
Bela, really informative and really important interview. What were your key takeaways?
You know, be prepared, I guess, is the best way to think about it. We spend when we're doing activities on the water, sailing, we spend a lot of time, you know, studying how to pull up the anchor, how to drop the anchor, how to adjust the sails, how our motor works on the boat, all those types of things. But we don't often think about and first aid. What if someone gets hurt? And the reason we want to have all this knowledge about how the boat works is because you're sort of out there by yourself. No one's next door to you. You can't knock on the person's door next door to you because there's no one's there. You might be 10, 20, 30, 100 miles from the nearest boat. So you got to be self-sufficient. So we think a lot about it from the perspective of the boat and navigating and rules of the road and all that kind of stuff. But we rarely think about it from the point of view of someone getting injured on the boat. And for anyone who's sailed, boy, there's a lot of ways to get injured on a boat. And so I think having some knowledge is important. And one of the reasons I say this is because you quickly need to assess, is this a life-threatening injury? And I need to call the Coast Guard or EMTs or someone to come help and come out here and help. Because if we don't, this person's going to be in serious trouble. Or is it a minor injury? And that's where some education, first aid education, is really helpful. And I don't care whether you take an EMT course, you know, which is pretty advanced, and it's a lot of hours. It's over 100 hours to take an EMT course, or whether you take a course like Rob did, which is a much more limited in scope, but very much focused on emergencies at sea. I think any of that type of knowledge is really good. And people say, well, I don't go offshore. I'm always in the bay, or I'm always, within a few miles of shore. Well, but you still could easily be a couple hours away from getting to an ambulance. Even on Narragansett Bay, it's like I could be out, and if someone gets hurt and they break a leg, and okay, I gotta call someone, I gotta find someone to meet us at a dock with the ambulance, right? There's a lot of logistic stuff that has to go on there. So don't think that it's not like at home where, I trip and fall, I break my leg, I dial 911, and 5 minutes, there's an ambulance here and they're taking me to the hospital. There's a much longer time constant involved. That's why knowing what to do, and knowing how to sort of handle some of these emergencies is really, really important. And let me tell you a story. I remember early on when we were chartering boats on Lake Champlain, we were in an anchorage with about a half a dozen other boats, and the boat next to us, they were dropping their anchor, and one of the people on the boat got their hand caught in the anchor chain as it was going down, and they injured their hand. And so we went through a process of, okay, there was a dock relatively close by, but it was about 45 minutes before the ambulance showed up because there's a lot of coordination that had to go on. And it all worked out fine. That person, came back to the boat, like 6 hours later after having spent some time in the emergency room. But even there, where we were really close to civilization, right? We were 100 yards from shore. It took 45 minutes to get all of that stuff coordinated and set up. So it takes time. So I highly recommend, having some first aid skills. And there's a lot of offerings out there that can give you some of that skill. Excuse me. How about you, Mike? What were your sort of thoughts?
Agreed. I think getting some first aid knowledge is really important. I remember back in the late 1980s, I worked in Boston in public health, and we all had the opportunity to take an EMT course. And I never actually became an EMT, right? But the training that I got in that course, I still have used recently in this day, again, in terms of assessing a situation and knowing when to call an ambulance and when you could kind of do something on your own and things like this. So I think that's a really cool skill. And I would think that anybody that would be out on a boat should have some basic first aid knowledge. Yeah. But my question to you, because, you've between sailing and, I know you've served many years, keen listeners will know you've served many years on the ski patrol. If you come up with like 2 or 3 basic kind of nuggets of advice for listeners, maybe those that haven't taken a first aid training course, what would those be?
Well, they talk about ABCs. Air is the person breathing, right? I mean, we're talking about, is someone going to die, right? So, as listeners know, they know my son and daughter-in-law are both emergency room physicians. And, I talked to my son about this, and he says, Dad, when a patient comes in, and if I don't do something in the next hour, they're going to die. That's when I earn my money. He goes, that's when the decisions I make are really critical. All of the other stuff I see, you have time. So I think number one is you want to have the skills to assess, is this person in serious trouble? And the areas for that, and this is not medical advice, but this is just, my experience. Are they breathing or not? If they're not breathing, you got to know how to do artificial respirations, right? And you can take a CPR course for that, and that'll cover, are they not breathing or is their heart not beating? So those two things are covered in a CPR course. That's, I think, maybe for a brand new person, CPR course is maybe 10 hours at most.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good place to start for sure.
Good place to start, right? That'll help you. And number one, it'll help you assess it to determine, are they breathing or not? Is their heart beating or not? And then what to do. The other thing that really, someone will die is if they have serious bleeding. So if they have a big wound, then you can do something about it, from putting a direct pressure bandage on it, tourniquet. Again, a pretty basic first aid course is going to go over this. Mm-hmm. The other place where you can bleed, where there's not much you can do, and that is internally. If you lose your balance, you bang your backside, your lower backside against the corner of one of the structures in your cabin or in the cockpit, and you injure your spleen, and your spleen starts bleeding internally, right? Again, recognizing this, what are sort of the signs and symptoms of that? That's an example of sort of internal bleeding stuff. So again, a basic first aid course will sort of take care of that for you. Now, let's say you're in a situation where even if with a basic first aid course, you don't know. If you're within cell phone distance, meaning you're coastal cruising, I would suggest dialing 911 in the United States as opposed to calling the Coast Guard. People, and this is just the people in 911, because in addition to the Coast Guard, and they're excellent, but in addition to the Coast Guard, almost every town or city in the coast has a fireboat and a police boat. And they can usually get to you much faster than the Coast Guard can because there's a higher density of them. Every city or town has a police boat, a harbor rescue boat, or they call them different things, and a fire department has a boat. And all of them are typically at least EMTs. So they can usually respond quicker. So if it's that type of thing, I think dialing 911 is better. If you're further out, then the Coast Guard. In either case, regardless of who you call, they are very good at helping you assess the situation. Those people are trained. The 911 operators, the Coast Guard radio operator, they are trained and they know what questions to ask you in order to assess the situation. And they can then coordinate and decide how to give you instructions on what to do, number one. And number two, how to get any assets to you to get that person evacuated off your boat, or to say, okay, this is not life-threatening. If you go to this marina that's 2 miles away from you, we'll have an ambulance there waiting for you. And the 911 folks are really good at coordinating those types of things. So sort of a long-winded answer with many elements to it, but having some basic rudimentary knowledge, I think, is really, really important, even if you're out day cruising.
Yeah, I think those 3 points were great, Bela. All right, this knowing what a true emergency is and not, knowing who to call, 911 or Coast Guard, to assess and get you through the situation, and third, using 911 when you're close to take advantage of their ability to coordinate faster. Right? Awesome. Now, this leads me to my last question, which is, to me, this to me is a no-brainer, but I don't know that people do this. But shouldn't you have to take a basic first aid or medical safety course to get a driver's license, to get a boating license, to get an aircraft license, right? Shouldn't we make it kind of required if you're going to be operating something where it's going at a fairly good rate of speed and it's a lot of mass, right? And I know for some levels of your ship captain's licenses, right, you have to have this, but shouldn't everybody have to take a course? And how do we kind of start a mass action to make that required?
So I would take it one step further, Mike. I think everyone who goes to high school should have a first aid course.
Yeah.
Because you may not be driving a car, you may not be flying an airplane or be on a boat, but you may come across a situation where your first aid skills are going to, if you had first aid skills, you could help someone. That's happened to me, numerous times. Sometimes at a store, someone collapses, right? Or a car accident, you come up on a car accident. So anyway, I think I would take it even further. I don't think it should be tied to your driver's license or driving a boat. I would even take it further and say everyone who graduates high school should be a requirement in primary education to take a first aid course.
I love it. But let's start with a gift. Everybody should make sure that they take the opportunity to take a CPR course or a basic first aid course.
Yes.
And maybe gift that to somebody, a young person or somebody in your life that isn't willing, or be willing to take them with you, to go ask them if they want to go with you, right? Invite them along, right? And I think if we could do that, that's huge progress. But I love the goal. I think it makes sense.
Yep. I agree, Mike. So should we wrap this one up?
Sure. I think we've been on our soapbox long enough. Listeners, thanks for joining us for yet another episode. And we hope you found our conversation, usually I say interesting and thought-provoking, but I hope it's important and you're willing to go take some action if you haven't already done this, or encourage others around you to do so. To contact us, as always, please feel free to send us an email at sailingtheeast, that's all one word, @gmail.com.
Mike, as you were saying that, I think I took my first aid course as a Boy Scout when I was 11 or 12 years old. And then when I got on ski patrol, when I was in my late teens, I took a pretty advanced first aid course. So I've been skilled in first aid for a long, long time. And there's a more than half a dozen, less than a dozen times that I have used those skills in sort of the public situation, right out in public, at a store or a mall or a hiking trail or whatever. So you never know, and it's always good to have. So anyway, I'll get off the soapbox yet again. So if you enjoyed the podcast, hit that like button on your podcasting app. You can also find our podcast now on YouTube. And if you know of someone that would make a good guest on the show, let us know. So that's it for today's episode. Hope to see you out there soon. Signing off from upstate New York. Take care.
And from over here in Münster, Germany, I just realized it's really getting dark early here. It's 5 o'clock and the sun is down. But listeners, thanks again and see you next time.